Okay, good evening everyone, good tavach. Wonderful to see everybody as we're sponsored by Mark Frankel, Lila Nishmas Yisrael Tzvi Ben Chaim Yeshua Falek by Berish Gesseman, Lila Nishmas Shoshana Basadina Chana for the physical, emotional, and spiritual protection, for Yeshua Menachem Mendel Ben Bela Shendel Rivka, by Baruch Ian Lila Nishmas Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba Esther Bas Yonah Avram Ben Shmuel HaKohen, and Lefu Shalem and Feliba Basanya by A.B. Spry, who is going to be heading to Eretz Yisrael, and we wish him a very safe trip and a mazel tov on a bar mitzvah of a grandchild. By Shalom Fogel, Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Yaakov Zeb ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas God, Yosef ben Tzim ben Yaakov Zev, Lefu Shalem for Moshe Aryeh ben Miriam, and for a great shidduch for Chayat Tzivya Bas Shoshana Gittel. We roll out the red carpet, the royal red carpet of welcome to Aaron Swade, who we love to have back. Really, yes. Really, Aaron, you light up the share. We learned for Aaron Ben Sarah that he should have a refuah shalema b'sei shechel Yisrael, and for Nachman Yaakov Ben Sarah as well should have a refuah shalema b'sei shechel Yisrael.
Rabbi Rice Mordechai Tzvi ben Ruschana.
Mordechai Tzvi ben Ruschana.
And Chaya Freda Bas Rachel Rivka.
Chaya Freda Bas Rachel Rivka.
David Menashe Alevi.
David Menashe Alevi.
Ben Rivka.
Ben Rachel. Okay. So we are holding two dots, 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Daled Amud Beis. So kachim bekachim min b'minai. We said if, let's say, Beresh's shlamim gets mixed up with Reb Herschel's shlamim, so the Gemara says, but how could we do that? We don't know which is which, and it needs the smicha by the bailam. And since we don't know which is which, how are they going to do smicha? Says the Gemara, v'habai smicha. You got to lean on it, on your animal. Amar Rav Yosef b'karban nashim. It's talking about the carbon brought by women, Mrs. Gesseman and Mrs. Waldner. Women don't do smicha because it says in the parasha smicha b'nei Aaron. I mean, it says in the parasha smicha that only men and not women. Says the Gemara, aval b'karban anashim loy, but not with the carbon of men. As we started.
Why can't each one do each carbon?
Okay, so that's a very good question. The simplest answer would be is that you're not allowed to lean on an animal and use an animal that's not yours. So, Eisvei Abaya. So Abaya asks, we learned carbon yochid shenis arbed b'carbon yochid, an individual's carbon that gets mixed with individual carbon, or the carbon sibber shenis arv b'carbon sibber, or one chatis of the musafim that gets mixed up with another chatis, or the carbon yochid b'carbon sibber shenis arvu zeh b'zeh, or a carbon yochid and a carbon sibber that get mixed up one with another. So says the Gemara, noisein dalid matanais mikol echad ve'echad. What you do is you offer 4 placements of blood from each one and say that it should be for whichever one it is. Now, if a chatis of a individual gets mixed up with a chatis of tzibur, so when it says dalid matanais, it means on 4 matanas of blood on the 4 corners, which we do by a chatas. If it's talking about, let's say, an oila gets mixed up with an oila, so when it says dalid matanas, it means shtayim shein arba, right? It's on 2 diagonal corners, and the northeastern corner and the southwestern corner, where it goes on the 4 walls, and that's why it's called daled matanas, from each one. Vim nosen matana mikol echad, And if you did only one placement from each one, yotza, because remember we said matana achas mehem is enough for the evet. Now let's say it's 2 olos, and you did by the 2 olos, instead of doing twice shtayim shein arba, you only did once v'imnasan arba mikulan. If you did, just one time, one time shtayim shein arba, you're also yotza. Now, the fact is that this lashon is a very misleading lashon, because the truth of the matter is that if there are 2 olos, you also only have to make one application. Yes, so Rashi says when it says arba matanos, it doesn't mean 4 matanos. It means shtayim matanos It seems to be that they're translating Rashi in a very interesting way. It seems to be arba matanos. It seems to be that according to the art scroll, the Chaknasan and the Taras HaKodesh learns that this Rashi the Be'inon Arba matanos shtayim mimatanos shehein arba. In other words, you do one placement which is 2 of that which is 4, because you don't have to do more than one placement. So the literal translation, v'imnasan arba mikulan. Let's see what the base says over here. One second, please. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, so the Shita Mekabetzes changes the Girsa. The Shita Mekabetzes says, V'imnosan matana mikol echad yotza, inami, inosan shtayim mikula yotza. Shtayim means if you do one against the corner, which goes into 2. So if it's a chatis, it means if you put it only on just one corner. If it's an oila, it means that you put one diagonal corner, which is shnayim, mikul and yatza. Again, one application is enough. And although it's very hard to read that into Rashi, that's the way the Chaknasan and the Taras HaKodesh learns Rashi as well. Rabbi says, well, not always will one application be enough. No. One application will be enough if there's enough blood for a minimum shear for each of the karbanos that got mixed up. Rabbi Royan imam esamatana. Im yesh ba kedei lezeh u kedei lezeh. If there's enough minimum blood for each carbon, because remember, 2 carbonates got mixed up. So if there's enough blood for each carbon, then kshera. V'im lav psula. But now, let's get back to our original question. We said that it's only if when would it be good if a carbon of a woman gets mixed up with a woman? But a carbon of a man that gets mixed up with a man, it wouldn't be good because of the problem of smicha. We wouldn't know on which one to do smicha. Now, kitani yochid dumya de tzibur. It says over here the individual similar to the tzibur, ma tzibur gavre, just like the community is men. Af yochid gavre, says the Gemara. So, but if somebody's chattis got mixed up with somebody else's chattis, how could it be good? You don't know which one to do smicha. Amar Rava, so Rava says with tizbur ahamitaretsdi. Do you think that this brisa, the way it's written, is viable? Mitaretz means it could work. The kitani bamed devar mamurim kishinis abru chayin. When they got mixed up while they were alive. Avul nisavru shchutim loy. But if they got mixed up after they were slaughtered, it's no good. So the Gemara says, mali chayim, mali shchutim. What's the difference if they're alive, and what's the difference if they're slaughtered? You could still, even just like when it was mixed up alive, you could do the avodah and say whichever one it is, that's what you're doing it for. You could do it after it's slaughtered also, when you put the blood on the altar. What's the difference? Ella hachikamer. Bamed varmurim shenisarvu shchutin ke'ein chayim, where it got mixed up when it was slaughtered, like when it's alive. In other words, it got mixed up, but the bloods are separate. Because, in other words, the bloods were separate. So if the bloods were separate, so you offer blood from one case and blood from the other case. And you say whichever one it is, if it's the tzibur, if it's the yachid, avul bebolel. But if the bloods got mixed up together, then noisin dalid matanas lekulin, you put 4 on the 4 corners for all of them at one time, and the imnasin matana achas lekulin. If you do one, it's okay. But it's all talking about where it got mixed up after it was slaughtered. So you already did the smicha, so it's not a problem of the smicha. Now, and that, this is a rare Matzah Shabbos for Shalom Fogel. Shalom, I noticed that. I give you a real special warm welcome to have a Shalom Fogel on Matzah Shabbos. I think I saw him. Yeah, there he is. Now, for those that are just joining us, we're 4 lines from the bottom of Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. Now, Rebbe Aimer Royan Es Hamatana Im Yesh Ba Kedei Lezeh Kedei Lezeh. When they get mixed up, you said it's good if you put only one blood placement on the altar, it will cover both of them. So Rebbe puts in a proviso. Rabbi Aimer Royan Es Hamatana Im Yesh Ba Kedei Lezeh Kedei Lezeh. If there's enough blood to go around for both of the karbanos kshera, v'im lav psula. Now that's a chiddush, because we know that Rebbe, although we're going to jump to another subject, Rebbe holds that by hazah, we know that if somebody becomes a tamei mace, then the din is that even a mashu of water sprayed on the person on the 3rd and the 7th day makes him tar. So you see, Rebbe doesn't hold of a minimum shear. So why should we say over here that he holds of a minimum shear? Wow, this is really interesting. We already have 36 Zoomers tonight. Wow, that's really, really something. That's really something. 36 Zoomers without Marshall. It just became 37. What's going on over here? What's going on?
Don't complain.
What's going on? I'm not complaining. You know what it must be? it must be that people heard on the grapevine that Aaron Swade is here. They heard Aaron Swade is here. Everybody's coming out of the woodwork to see you, Aaron. Aaron, you greatly missed. Not missed, greatly missed. Just know it. So says the Gemara, Mi Yislay the Rebbe High Svar, that you need a minimum amount of blood. Vatanya, Amar Rebbe, L'divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer addresses what happens if the meichatas, the water of lustration, gets mixed up with Poland spring water. So the Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, Hazah kol shehu metaheres. Even from the mixture, just a little bit of hazah is enough, because the hazah doesn't need a shear, because hazah ain't a tzrich a shear, and therefore hazah on machzah kosher or machzah puzzle, hazah with a mixture where half of it is kosher and half of it is puzzle is okay, because in a little bit, since it's thoroughly mixed together, in a little bit you'll have some of the meichatas, and therefore it's good. So you see that Rebbe holds that you don't need a shear. So then why over here does he say that if you don't have enough blood for each of the karbanas, it's no good? So the Gemara gives one of two answers. The first answer is l'devar of the Rabbi Eliezer Kamar. That's not Rebbe's own opinion. There he was citing Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. He holds you need a shear. The Iba is saying, this is another simple answer, Hazah l'chud u'nesina l'chud. By Hazah he holds there's no minimum. But by putting of the blood, he does hold there's a minimum. Now we learned, Nisarvu b'becharu ma'aser. Now remember we said that a bechar balmum, a bechar that's a balmum, has residual kedusha, and you're not allowed to redeem it. You're not allowed to sell it by weight. So here's an interesting question. Amar Rami Bachama, bechar leBeis Shammai. The Beis Shammai holds that even a bechar balmum has residual kedusha, and a nida is not allowed to eat it. Even though other tameim are allowed to eat it, but a nida whose tumah is yoytze megufa is not allowed to eat it. So asks the Gemara, b'char leBeis Shammai ein machilin lenidus tmurosay ma'u. What if you said on this b'char zeh tachas zeh, and you make an exchange? Can the exchange be eaten by a nida? Bechar ain't a nipta. We said a bechar balmum, like meiser, can't be redeemed. Tmurasay ma'u, its exchange, can it be redeemed? Bechar ain't a nishka litra. The bechar balmum you have to treat with dignity, and you're not allowed to weigh it on a scale against a liter. Tmurasay ma'u. Amar Rava answers this from a brisa. Amar Rava Tanya bechar u'meiser. Bechar and meiser, mishehumamu, when it gets blemished, oisin tmura, it can make an exchange, but utmurasan kayotzibem, the exchange has the same din. So you can't sell it, weigh it with a litra, you cannot redeem it, and a nida, according to Beis Shammai, wouldn't be able to eat it. Now, you know what? I'm so excited. We have so many wonderful people here. I want to welcome everybody in. Ben Cian Cohn, Aaron Swade, Saba, Mel Zachter, Dr. Block, Irving Fishbaum, Yaakov Warman, Yitzi Fuchs, Yisrael Fisher, Dr. Guy, Nachman Chapler, Shimon Klein, Barry Cement, A.B. Spry, Michael, Menachem Umansky, Rabbi Kranz, Eddie Chazan, Rebellia Yafi, Mark Frankel, Gedalia Engel, Yitzi Muller, Dr. Eisenberg, Michael Avram, Stephen Holtzman, Moshe Lehman, Chaim Braun, Naftali Jablin, Ilya Shutman, Danny Vogel, who's back from L.A., and we wish his mother a full shalema, Avram Rezepkowitz, Richard Rosenzweig, Shalom Fogel, A.B. Arbach, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, and David Helfgott here in the shul, Barish Gesseman, Herschel Waldner, who is planning not to miss another share till Mashiach, and Ruvain Shannon. We're going to send a threatening letter to his employment. We're going to.
What does doing a Tamura gain then?
What?
What does Tamura gain?
Well, first of all, it's an Avera, but the Tamura gains that it puts a Kedusha on the animal that you're exchanging with.
But you can't do anything with it then?
No.
So he didn't gain anything?
Except for doing an Avera.
Okay, got it.
Now, Boy Rami Bar Chama, Hitfix Bechar Lebedek Kabayis. This is an interesting thing. This is something that Mark Frankel would do. He takes a Bechar that has a Balmum, and he dedicates it to temple maintenance. Now, since now it belongs to temple maintenance, we have an argument that we should be able to weigh it properly in order to get more money for hektish. If you weigh it properly, it belongs to temple maintenance. You want temple maintenance to make the maximum money. If you weigh it properly, you'll get the most money. But then you're causing indignity to something that has residual kedushas bechar. So that's the Gemara Shaila. Boy Rami Bar Chama hit this bechar lebedek kabayis. Maushi yishko beliftra. Can we measure it against a litra in a scale? Ravcha de hektish adif. Are we more worried about making profit for hektish? Oidilma zilusa de bechar adif. Or we're more worried that we shouldn't cause disgrace to this bechar. It's a balmum. So Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida Tosh Ma'ah. We said nisarvu b'bechar u'b'maiser. If an animal gets mixed up with bechar and maiser, yiru achi yistavu. We let it pasture until it gets a mum. V'ya'oichlu k'bechar u'k'maiser. And we eat it like bechar and maiser. So we see that we eat it like bechar and maiser. So even though the kachim that gets mixed up with it is not going to be able to be weighed in a scale, and therefore we're going to get less value when we redeem the kachim that got a balmum, we're not going to do it. Says the Gemara, Lav Lameimra de Einoi Nishka Beliktra. Says the Gemara, well, that's different. Ravuna Rav Chizkiah Talmid Rab Yirmi Emrei Mi Dami. Hasam Shtei Kedushos Ushnei Gufen. There, it's two kedushas, two holiness, and two separate bodies. So over there, we'll say yes. You could when you redeem it, you could the one that you redeem, you could measure by against the litra. Because over there, you're not for certain doing it with the animal that's bechar and maiser. Because it's two different animals that got mixed up. Hacha, but here we know it's the bechar. We dedicated the bechar to bedek maiser. Then we know we would be measuring the bechar against a scale and causing it to the indignity. Hacha shtei kedushas v'guf echad. It has Kedushas Bechar, and also Mark was Matkish the Bedek Abayis. Here we would certainly be doing an indignity to Bechar. Maybe that's not allowed. So Maskevil Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, Ma ilum amar hiptali Bechar shetfisu lebedek Abayis. If we would say, okay, since you dedicated to Bedek Abayis, we want to be able to redeem it, to make more money for Hagdish. Would we do that? Of course not, right? Because it's a bechar balmum which is not allowed to be redeemed. Klum shayminai, says the Gemara. That's different. That's different because Amar Rachman lo yisifta. The Torah says you shouldn't redeem it. What do you can't compare apples and oranges. But what we're going to say is is obviously there's a rule, Ma mocha rishon l'sheni kol zchus shebiyadai. When I sell you something, I could only sell you all the rights that I had. You can't get more rights than what I had. So here too, when Mark dedicated this Bechor to Bedek Habayis, since the Bechor, he wasn't allowed to weigh against a scale, so when he dedicates the Bedek Habayis, they can't get more than what he had. And that's what the Gemara says. What can Mark transfer only the rights that he had, and since he didn't have a right to weigh it against the scale, when he dedicates it to Bedek Habayis is also not going to be able to weigh it against the scale.
So how are you telling you to weigh it?
Only by estimation. Now, Hakol Yecholim L'Isarv, the last case in the Mishnah is everything could get mixed up except a Chatas and an Oshim, which is simple because a Chatas is a female and an Oshim is a male, so that can't get mixed up. Unless Eddie is drunk. But besides that, you can't get mixed up. One's a male and one's a female. So today in our crazy society, we could get mixed up between males and females. But in the olden days, you can't get mixed up between a male and a female. Says the Gemara, that it can't get mixed up, so then the same thing is true also by a chatas v'oilanami. An oila is a zachar and a chatas is in a keva. Why does it only say a chatas and an oshim? Says the Gemara, you know why? Because there is a sa'ir that's a male. Ika sar nasi. There's the sar of the nasi, which is a male, so that can get mixed up with an oila. Says the Gemara, then what about in the case of the chatas and the oshim? So you said the oshim is a male, but the chatas could be the chatas of the nasi, which is also a male. So the Gemara says no, because when it comes to the chatas of a nasi, it's a goat, and that's high sayar. That a goat has hair, while an oshim is a ram, and that's wool. High sayar, high temer, so that can't get mixed up. Says the Gemara, well, Pesach v'oshim nami loy ma'arav. A Pesach and an oshim should also not be able to be mixed up, because a Pesach has to be a yearling, and an oshim is in the second year. Pesach v'oshim nami loy ma'arav, high ben shana, right? The Pesach has to be a yearling, v'high ben shtei shanim. So the Gemara first answers, there is an oshim that's a yearling. Ika oshim nazir v'oshim mitzayra. There's the oshim of the nazir that becomes tamei, and the oshim of the mitzayra, which is also in the first year. Or the Gemara says, believe me, you could get mixed up between the first year and the second year. Even Herschel, who worked in B&H for many years and knows a lot of products, he cannot tell the difference between a year-old sheep and a 2-year-old sheep. We won't even know if it's 3 years old,
Just a couple of days could make a difference.
Right, correct. That's what the Gemara says. There's a 1 year that looks like a 2 year. It is a 2 year, that looks like a 1 year. So what do we do? Do we change channels now or go further?
My father is able to tell how old it is. If there's anything wrong with it.
Well, again, even your father might not be able to tell the difference between a 1-year-old and a 1-year-old in 2 days. So now.
I don't understand why make the farmer put out like a color how old it is for what it is.
Well, that's what they had when you went to the merchant. There's no question that when the merchant had to show you a birth certificate. There's no question, because when you bought a carbon Pesach, you had to have a birth certificate, because you had to know if it's more than a year old, it can't be used for a carbon Pesach. There's no question about it. Okay, we're going to pause now to change the channel.